In the mechanics of enlightenment, there is a fatal system error. It is known as failure mode 3, the mathematical impossibility of achieving liberation in a single lifetime when a practitioner's initial karmic inertia is simply too massive to stop. To understand the physics of this failure, we have to look at the samsaric limit cycle as a continuous time dynamical system. In our previous analysis, we showed how the 37-factor optimal controller operates in real time to break this exact cycle. But that real-time controller faces a strict biological limitation. It only has a finite window of time to operate before biological death, a duration we define as TL. Against that biological clock, we have to weigh the starting conditions. We'll call this variable B0, the initial karmic inertia or accumulated defilement that a being carries with them into a new lifetime. This plot shows the exact mathematical condition where liberation fails. Our system state begins high on the y-axis at B0, and the controller forces the continuous ODE curve downward. But the initial inertia is so large that the curve hits the hard vertical boundary of biological death before reaching the zero baseline, forcing the system to loop back and restart. The required time to drive the system to zero strictly exceeds the available biological time. The math forbids completion. This is not a failure of the optimal controller, nor is it a lack of effort or dedication by the practitioner. The physics of the system dictate that real-time control is not enough. Achieving liberation requires a separate mechanism, one designed to systematically alter those starting conditions before the biological clock even begins. The canonical Theravāda resolution to this exact problem is the 10 pāramī, the perfections systematically cultivated across multiple lifetimes. It is a common professional misconception to treat these perfections as arbitrary moral virtues or cultural metaphors added on for good measure. The mathematical reality is exact. The pāramī act as a discrete time preconditioning protocol. Their sole function is to systematically shrink the initial condition, B0, life after life. To see how they accomplish this, we map them against the underlying structure of reality in this framework, the 28-dimensional non-kernel E8 visible sector. This geometric representation of the E8 root lattice reveals a zero-parameter bijection. There are exactly 10 pāramī because they uniquely and perfectly cover this geometry without any free parameters. Notice the two distinct structural types, 4 isolated single-point nodes, and 6 interlocking clusters, each containing 4 nodes. The 4 isolated nodes correspond to one-dimensional Cartan subalgebras, while the 6 clusters represent 4-dimensional relational root generators. 4 times 1 plus 6 times 4 equals exactly 28 dimensions. These 10 pāramī constitute a complete covering map for the E8 Lie algebra space, where every dimension of the visible sector maps to a specific required volitional modification. Knowing the geometry, we can define exactly what is being modified across these lifetimes. The fractal inheritance operator, denoted as F inherited. F inherited is the specific matrix that carries kamma-weighted state configurations from a dying consciousness over to a new rebirth consciousness. This matrix operates in a 29-dimensional space. However, one of those dimensions is the perfectly stable Nibbana kernel, which requires zero conditioning. This complete 29 by 29 matrix block separates its single diagonal kernel cell, leaving 28 dimensions subject to distortion. This remaining block mathematically fractures into 10 structurally independent orthogonal submatrices, mapping directly to the Abhidhamma's 10 Chetana-type sectors. The causal laws of the Patana algebra guarantee that these 10 sectors are completely orthogonal. They cannot cross-contaminate one another. Because of this strict independence, each of the 10 pāramī is permanently assigned to condition 1 and only one of these independent submatrices. Dana and Sila map directly onto 4-dimensional relational blocks, while Satya and Aditana slot into the one-dimensional Cartan blocks. This causal independence explains why a practitioner might carry a perfectly clean sector while struggling with a catastrophically distorted one in another area of their life. To guarantee liberation from any starting condition, all 10 operators must be systematically applied. Leaving even one out would leave a sector mathematically frozen above the critical threshold forever. When a single pāramī is cultivated in a single lifetime, it acts mathematically as a decoupling operator, reducing the amplitude of its assigned F-inherit sector. Take the first perfection, dana, or generosity. It is mapped to a four-dimensional root sector that governs hoarding and scarcity modes. The E8 root structure determines the contraction rate for this sector by the ratio of the loba root spectral gap to the total visible sector bandwidth. This ratio resolves to exactly 1/3, causing the matrix block to shrink by that specific amount with each effective lifetime. This specific spectral ratio dictates that 1.7 lifestint practice are required to reduce the hoarding karmic weight by exactly half. Now compare that to the 10th perfection, upekkha, or equanimity, which is mapped to a one-dimensional kartan sector. Upekkha serves a highly specialized function. It removes valence lock, the structural mechanism that links pleasant sensory input directly to craving amplification. This 1x1 block represents the upekkha sector. Because it targets a smaller one-dimensional space and disables the system's feedback amplifier, upekkha possesses the highest contraction rate of all the perfections. It cuts its sector's mass by exactly 1/2 with each effective lifetime. The rate of spiritual progress across lifetimes isn't subjective. It is strictly bounded by the dimensional volume and spectral properties of the specific defect being corrected. This brings us to the final canonical variable. The ancient texts insist that each of the 10 pāramī must be cultivated at 3 distinct levels: ordinary, superior, and ultimate. Within any given sector, the eigenmodes are mathematically layered by depth, determined by their specific Kuti coupling strength. Kuti coupling is the degree to which a karmic mode is intertwined with the life continuation drive, known as the C-hat operator. This diagram maps the matrix block as a concentric ring. The ordinary level targets peripheral modes like wealth. The superior level penetrates to central modes encompassing the physical body. The deepest karmic weights reside in the innermost core, directly pierced by the C-hat axis. The ultimate level, the pāramatha, requires the practitioner to give up life itself. This sacrifice is the exact operator required to decouple these deepest root modes. At this depth, the projection operator mathematically commutes with the life continuation drive. This commutation ensures the modification survives the death-rebirth transition. Because the operators commute, the state of that specific karmic channel remains invariant across future lifetimes. By combining the 10 sectors and their 3 Kuti coupling levels, we reveal the complete multi-lifetime algorithm, 30 distinct projection operators. These 30 operators form a complete cover of the F-inherit space. Not a single dimensional gap is left unaddressed. This brings us to Theorem 11. The systematic application of this complete set across n lifetimes acts as a multidimensional Banach contraction mapping. This phase space simulation shows exactly what a Banach contraction guarantees. No matter how chaotic or massive the starting state, repeated application of the operator will force the system toward a single stable fixed point, drawing exponentially closer with every single iteration. In this protocol, that target fixed point is the Kiriya configuration, a completely liberated, kamma-neutral state. The pāramī protocol translates liberation from a hopeful metaphysical goal into a guaranteed mathematical convergence, strictly bound by finite time. We must clarify a critical interface here. The multi-lifetime pāramī protocol does not execute final liberation itself. It only prepares the initial conditions. This split screen shows how the discrete multi-lifetime protocol systematically lowers the starting inertia, B0, and hands it off to the continuous 37-factor controller. Once B0 drops below the critical threshold, the controller's real-time curve plunges to 0, easily beating the biological clock. We can apply this exact framework to the ultimate extreme case in Theravāda cosmology, the bodhisattva. A Buddha-to-be must clear not just their personal karmic inertia, but an astronomically massive B0 that encompasses every possible structural defilement, precisely so they can rediscover and transmit the complete framework. Only a zero-parameter, complete Lie algebra mapping, like the 10 pāramī, could mathematically survive and contract an initial condition of that absolute magnitude. The mechanics of the 28-dimensional algebraic control sequence provide the rigorous framework for the execution of what is traditionally described as the path to enlightenment.